Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Bay of Fundy Travel Show. We are here at Joggins Fossil Cliffs in Nova Scotia at the top of the Bay of Fundy, a really interesting site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's actually the best place in the world to see fossils that show the biodiversity of the coal age in geological time, and that's about 300 million years ago. We're going to take a tour on the beach with one of the interpreters, we're going to walk on the beach at low tide, and we're also going to discover the interpretive center. Ah, nice. Let's get going. There's an excellent map here showing where to go when you get to the beach, and there are interpreters on the beach as well. We're going to go down and go along Coal Mine Point and up to Lower Cove. When you're visiting Joggins, you want to be sure to stay well away from the cliffs here, as you can see by this warning sign. Kind of funky. It looks like a couple of clouds, but it's actually a couple of rocks dropping down on an unsuspecting visitor. And of course, be aware of the tide times and be off the beach 3 hours before high tide. They actually post the tide times here, and they do change every day, so you'll want to plan your visit around them. And be careful walking on the beach as well. Some of the rocks can be very slippery. Oh good, the tide times, let's see. Low tide now for a few hours, so it's safe to go to the beach. Perfect.
Is changing its course. It's carving new channels into it.
In general, if you walk 1 kilometer on the beach, you're walking 1 million years through time in Joggins. So you have 15 kilometers of cliffs representing 15 million years of Earth's history. It's a continuous window in Earth's history.
Wow, yeah. And that's probably part of what got Joggins the UNESCO World Heritage
Yeah, the threshold to cross is really high. The UNESCO is looking for something it calls outstanding universal values, so something which is very important for all of the world to enjoy.
Right.
And Joggins overall is known as the best place in the world to study a period in Earth's history called the Carboniferous.
Oh, neat. Yeah. That's very neat. Any dinosaurs over here? Or?
No, dinosaurs are actually much younger.
Yes.
About 100 million years younger than the fossils of Joggins, and you can find those in Parsborough. Overall, when you're looking at the fossils of Joggins, you can think of a tropical swamp, very humid, you know. There were a lot of plants, they were quite large. The plants were very, very different. I call them the Dr. Seuss trees because they're just so strange. There are 3 different environments represented in Joggins overall. So Joggins used to be a delta 300 million years ago. Most of this delta or deltaic environment is swamps. But sometimes those swamps were completely underwater, so you have layers of limestone rocks which form underwater, containing fish bones or shark bones, worms, shells, and so on. And immediately outside the delta, conditions were much drier. This large layer of sandstone was formed in several flash flood events. There were a lot of rivers in Joggins. They would burst their banks very often, so they would leave a lot of sands and muds over the landscape. So you see a tree stump behind me. It's called the lycopod. Lycopods are giant mosses. When they died, they became completely hollow. We have a piece of bark from a type of tree called the lepidodendron, so the term tree is used relatively loosely. These are actually giant club mosses. The rigid outer bark served as a mold for the sediments and debris falling inside, later turning into rock.
Wow, and I mean, this looks like a tree.
It does, doesn't it?
It's stone, so.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Yeah. So you have a thin layer of coal. You also have a bit of a pattern here, a very stretched diamond pattern. The diamond pattern is much clearer towards the top of the tree. It looks a lot like snakeskin, but as the tree grew, this became a lot more distorted. So this is a piece of bark from the bottom of a lepidodendron tree.
That's very cool. This is why you have to come to the beach with an interpreter. All the layers here are at an angle, so they've obviously shifted.
Yeah, the tree used to be like that. It used to be flat. Okay. Yeah. These also give really good benchmarks for understanding how sands and muds accumulate in the fossil cliffs. Mm-hmm. That one was maybe buried in about 200 years. So here I am collecting a well-known fossil fuel, coal. Coal is essentially fossil peat, and peat forms in swamps. These would be very different environments than what we recognize today. These swamps were just south of the equator in a very, very warm climate. Plants would fall in the water, start to break down, and when they break down, they remove oxygen from the water. Once the oxygen is removed, plants can continue to pile up, and they do so forming peat, and coal is fossil peat. What I find is impressive is that Plants, like peat, which gave us this coal, fossilized in a 10-to-1 ratio. So you needed 10 meters of peat,
Wow.
which is something like 5,000 years accumulation of plants to have this 1 meter thick coal
Wow.
seam. The stairs are built on top of what was a coal landing dock, so you see a lot of remains of human history in Joggins. This is called hematite. It's essentially pure iron. It's very heavy. This material was often used as ballast by the ships which arrived at the wharf. You see the main stem here, and then root here is growing, or secondary roots, growing on each side. Each dot on the surface of that stem shows where other roots grew out this way. On this slab of rock, we see resting traces of horseshoe crabs. Their round body and their tail are found here. There's another one here, another here. Horseshoe crabs are essentially living fossils. They were around even 100 million years before Joggins. They're incredibly old. They didn't change at all except in size. They only got bigger.
So if you find a fossil on the beach, be sure, or something you think is a fossil, everything looks really cool down here actually, be sure to check in with one of the interpreters. They're identified by name tag and with the Joggins Fossil Cliffs shirts on, and see what you think it might be. You look like you found it looks like a dinosaur egg.
Looks like an egg.
Yeah, it does.
Ask me what it was.
Yeah.
It's a nodule or a lump of mineral called siderite. It forms around fossils, so it can have anything from a plant to a bone inside.
Is that right?
So it might have something inside it, like
Inside, yeah, but if you took a hammer to it though, you would break whatever is in there.
Oh.
Those need to freeze and thaw
So we'll
several
probably
times.
shatter in.
Yeah, if you took a hammer to it, it would shatter completely. They need to freeze and thaw, and then they break open exactly where the fossil is.
really?
Yeah.
So do you see them on the beach broken open as well? Like you walk along and you just look down
In the springtime.
Are they always in the shape of a dinosaur egg?
Sometimes they look like dinosaur poop, like you have different.
Dinosaur poop? Oh, no, I like the dinosaur egg part anyway. I'll take that. Yeah. So Ryan, a really interesting building that you have here for the Interpretive Center. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually one of the greenest buildings in Nova Scotia. First, I'd like to mention our 12 solar panels here, and between the 12 solar panels here and our turbine in the background there, we actually produce about 2/3 of our operational power. And you can also see our green roof from here, and the green roof actually serves three purposes. One, actually compensates for the amount of soil loss from the laying of foundations of the building. Two, it provides excellent insulation value, and thirdly, it actually filters water that we collect and use for our toilets and for watering plants, called non-potable water. The reason why we chose a green building for the Joggins Fossil Center is because Joggins is famous for its Carboniferous fossils, and the Carboniferous period also gave us coal. Today, we still use coal as a source of generating electricity, and coal actually accounts for the most amount of pollution generated by humans, and actually leads to global warming and climate change. So what we're doing at Joggins with the construction of our building is we're actually trying to make a transition from the coal burning past, the pollution coal burning past, to a more environmentally friendly and sustainable future. So that's what the Joggins Fossil Center actually symbolizes.
So the other key feature about Joggins is that we have 15 kilometers of coastline that are being actively eroded, and those 15 kilometers are fossil-bearing rock. So the likelihood that as the cliffs erode, that we discover new fossils and new species is really high. Many famous scientists wrote about Joggins. In particular, Charles Darwin wrote about Joggins and On the Origin of the Species. Charles Lyell wrote a geology manifesto, essentially, and it was based on what he discovered at Joggins. So the history of science is really strong, and it dates back to the 1850s and is ongoing today. We have a research scientist who works from Joggins full-time and has partnered with many universities. Oftentimes we're asked about whether or not the tree trunks that we have in here are fake. All of the fossils are authentic. They're not replicant.
All right, well that was pretty cool. I think that's for the kids, but it's a day in the life of a coal-age swamp. That's neat. That was neat. One of the really neat things about Joggins is that you can get quite close to the fossils, certainly on the beach and here in the gallery as well. There's some really neat exhibits like this giant tree trunk here, which are out and available to touch and get to know. Some of the smaller fossils are best seen through a microscope, so you can go and be a paleontologist for the day and take a look at fossils. Well, this is really cool. This is one of those geological time periods, but it's really well laid out. You get an idea of what the Earth was doing 299 million years ago to 360 million years ago, which is when Joggins was formed.
We have a few spots which are fish poop in this, and when a kid comes up to me and says, you know, is this a fossil? I say, yes, yes, you can touch it too, it's a real fossil. And then I say, what do you think it is? Well, I don't know, it looks like chalk. No, it's fossil fish poop.
And you only tell them that after they touch it, that it's fossilized fish poop. Yeah, that's very sweet of you. That's great.
After 300 million years, it's not so accumulated.
Yeah, I guess not.